In this video, I want to talk a bit about some of the things that can happen when your immune system does not function perfectly. Like most aspects of the human body, your immune response needs to be kept in balance. There's kind of a middle range in which your immune system is working perfectly healthy, perfectly normally, and you stay healthy. But if your immune response is too weak, you have immune deficiencies, and that can leave you vulnerable to a whole host of infections. On the other end of the spectrum, if your immune response is too strong, you end up responding to things that you shouldn't. You get hypersensitivity reactions or autoimmune diseases, where your immune system attacks your own body. So, either too little or too much can be problematic. The most severe immunodeficiencies can arise from birth. And these are genetic disorders. They're called primary immunodeficiencies because it's just, it's a genetic condition. It's not as a result of anything else. So the most severe form is called SCID, Severe Combined Immunodeficiency, and you may be familiar with it as the bubble boy disease. In SCID, there are deficiencies in B and T cells, and there may also be a reduction in NK cells. Kids with this disease often die of opportunistic infections by the age of 1 or 2. An opportunistic infection is an infection that takes advantage of the lack of an immune system in order to cause disease. So it's an infection that people with a healthy immune system may get, but may not even realize they have because their immune system wipes it out before they even notice that there's an infection. But if you have a weakened immune system, the opportunistic infection becomes full-blown, causes symptoms, and can kill you. So opportunistic infections are problematic. Now, if you have a child that's born with a primary immunodeficiency, they can get a bone marrow transplant, basically replacing their entire immune system, because remember, the bone marrow is where your blood cells are made, including your white blood cells. So if you have a genetic deficiency in lymphocytes, in B cells, T cells, and NK cells, you replace the tissue that makes the lymphocytes with tissue of a different genetic background. That's what a bone marrow transplant does. Now, primary immunodeficiencies are genetic. There's also acquired immunodeficiency syndrome, which is acquired as the result of a viral infection. You may be more familiar with it by its acronym. AIDS. That's what AIDS stands for. The virus that causes AIDS is the human immunodeficiency virus, HIV. And this is just a cartoon version of HIV over here. It's showing that HIV actually uses the CD4 co-receptor on helper T cells to get into the cell. So the virus, HIV, latches onto CD4 and gets inside your T cells. So the cells that HIV attacks are actually the CD4 positive T cells. We all know HIV can be transmitted by body fluids, blood, or semen. Thankfully, it's very short-lived outside the body, so it doesn't really stick around on surfaces. As the HIV virus replicates, your helper T cell count goes through the floor. A normal CD4 positive T cell count is about 600 cells per microliter of blood. Someone with an HIV infection, they are categorized as having AIDS when their CD4 positive T cell count drops below 200 cells per blood. So less than a third of what a normal, healthy individual has. Now, CD4 positive T cells As the helper cells, remember, they're the ones that kind of coordinate all of the other immune responses in the body. They help out CD8 positive cells, they help out phagocytes, they help out B cells. So when AIDS destroys the CD4 positive cells, your immune system is really devastated. Okay, now let's look at the other end of the spectrum when you have an immune response that is too much. Autoimmune diseases are relatively common. There's a whole variety of autoimmune diseases. Basically, almost any part of your body can be vulnerable to an autoimmune response. Some of the ones you may have encountered before are multiple sclerosis, where it's the myelin-forming cells of your nervous system that are destroyed. Graves' disease. You produce antibodies that actually attack the thyroid, only it's a bit weird because these antibodies actually mimic thyroid-stimulating hormone, so they actually have a stimulatory effect on the thyroid. Type 1 diabetes mellitus, where your immune system destroys your pancreatic beta cells. Lupus is kind of a systemic autoimmune disease where your immune system produces antibodies against DNA and against the nucleus, so antibodies that can basically attack almost every cell in your body. So there's a whole host of symptoms associated with lupus. Rheumatoid arthritis is another one that's pretty commonly heard of, and that's where your immune system attacks your joints. But you can also get your immune system attacking your blood vessels, attacking your heart, attacking your skin, attacking your digestive tract, attacking your respiratory tract, attacking your eyes, a whole load. Basically, like I said, almost any part of your body can be affected by autoimmune disease. The etiology of autoimmune disease is complex, and there's probably a lot of different factors. There is a genetic component of most of them, so some people are just genetically more vulnerable to autoimmune disease. And it actually has to do with the MHC molecules. So there are some MHC genes that are associated with diabetes or associated with multiple sclerosis, for example. It's thought that there's also an environmental role, perhaps some kind of virus or bacterial infection that kind of triggers the immune response that then crosses over, gets confused, and starts attacking your own tissue. And in a lot of disorders, it's thought that there's a failure of immune regulation, just something, there's some T cells that escape, or B cells that escape the normal self-tolerance mechanisms. Because that's what autoimmune disease is. It's a failure of self-tolerance, a failure to discriminate between you and not you, between self and foreign antigens. And then there are the hypersensitivities. The hypersensitivities are exactly what they sound like. Hyper meaning too much, sensitivity. So you're too sensitive to an antigen that you really don't need to respond to. You really don't need to attack. The most common types of hypersensitivities are type 1 and type 4. So type 1 hypersensitivity is what you know as allergies. And this involves the IgE antibodies. So this is your IgE antibodies sitting on the surface of a mast cell or a basophil. These are the little inflammatory granules. When that IgE antibody binds its antigen, the mast cell or basophil releases all of those granules, spewing inflammatory molecules out into the tissue, triggering the allergic response. Now you have to make the IgE antibodies. You have to have them there in order to develop the allergy, and that's why people get what's called sensitization. You know, you may not initially have an overwhelming allergic response, but with repeated exposures, you get more sensitive and you get a stronger response because your immune system is producing more IgE. type 4 hypersensitivity is a delayed response, and it's a little bit longer because it's cell-mediated, so you need to get the T cells involved. Type 1, you're just talking about antibodies with IgE. Type 4, you're getting T cells. You see this type 4 response. It's called delayed. It can take 1 to 3 days to appear. You see it with insect bites, with mycobacterial proteins. So like if you've taken a mycobacterial test, a tuberculosis test, excuse me, it can take a bit of time for the reaction to come up. And then you see swelling and redness. You can also have a contact dermatitis to poison ivy or to nickel. That's also a type 4 hypersensitivity. So the haptens response is a contact hypersensitivity. Celiac disease is also a contact hypersensitivity, and that's where you have this immune response to gluten in your food, and that destroys the villi of your small intestine. So as far as what you should be able to answer, what you should understand after studying this video, it's pretty straightforward. Be able to discuss the immune disorders, primary immunodeficiency, acquired immunodeficiency, autoimmune disease, and the hypersensitivities. Talk a little bit about where they come from, how they arise. So primary immunodeficiency is genetic, AIDS through HIV infection, autoimmune disease, kind of a complex set of factors, and the hypersensitivities, sensitization. And discuss a little bit about how each of these affect the body